Larry Pollock and Luke Harrow with the Underground Performance Podcast. Today, we're here to talk about Chris Bumstead making his debut in the open category in Prague, coming up in November. I believe it's 16th of November, just a couple weeks away. And we're going to discuss how we feel he's going to do and in comparison to the other open class competitors, specifically Martin Fitzwater, since he's a front runner after just taking fourth in the Olympia. So, do you want to kick it off, or you want me to?
Well, let's get your thoughts on it. I want to hear what you think about Chris doing this crossover.
So, first of all, I think Chris is an awesome competitor. He's obviously 6-time classic physique competitor, and super popular and amazing condition, amazing physique. No one can deny that. However, my personal opinion is if you stick a classic guy, even Chris Bumstead, in the open lineup, you're going to see when he's standing next to those guys, the size disparity, how much of a difference there is. They actually did a training video where Martin is training with Chris, and they did a leg training video, and you can see in the video they're standing side by side, and Martin says we both weigh the same. The difference is Chris is 6 inches taller than Martin.
Yeah.
So the size difference is just Martin's way bigger muscle wise than Chris, and you're going to see that on stage. I think he's, with all his proportions and shape and structure and everything, is great, but he's going to look thin next to these guys. That's my opinion.
I tend to think the same. I mean, this is the whole reason that we have different classes. I mean, it's exactly this. And I think Chris is a bodybuilder at heart and a competitor at heart, and he wants to see how he does without the restriction of having to cut down to the I think it's 242 weight cutoff that he has to get down to at 6'1". And I think he just wants to see what he looks like full. Personally, I would love to see it if he did like a year off and came into it where he was able to actually put on the mass and not have to cut down, through the prep. But I queued up some. We have their routines from this past Olympia, and then also the wild card is going to be Sean Clarita threw his hat into the ring as well. So we can talk about that. I didn't get all the poses because classic guys don't do every bodybuilding pose, but we have some comparisons here. So let's watch through these routines and kind of just do a little bit of commentary on them. This is Chris on this first video. I mean, just aesthetic as fuck, shredded to the bone, all the way through. Just a showman on his posing for sure. Any thoughts on Chris?
He amplifies classic and what classic is about. The thing is, he's perfect for classic, which is why he's 6-time classic Mr. Olympia. But this is open bodybuilding, and the judging criteria is different.
Yeah.
Than classic. They do different poses, and size does matter.
I think his aesthetics can carry him pretty far. If you put him in the open lineup, where would you place him in this year's open lineup?
In the Olympia?
Yeah, in the Olympia. Because you and I watched it live. If he's up there aesthetically, I kind of see him matching up with like somebody like Rafa, which Rafa got, I think, maybe around like 9th or 10th or something like that. I see him, if he's going up against, those guys in the 6th, like Hunter, and who else was up there in the 6, 7, 8? I think like Bonek, tons of muscle, Brandon Curry. I think he's going to get obviously heavily out muscled. He's going to have better structure than those guys, and he's going to have way better conditioning, because we've been seeing those guys kind of slide on the conditioning. Definitely, Brandon and Bonek. So that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, if you see a guy, it's a tough thing to call, because bodybuilding is about conditioning, and he's bringing that in spades. And these guys that are in the middle of the pack, they are starting to have more blown out waists, less, no leg cuts on some of these guys.
Right.
So, I think from the front, Chris kind of holds his own on the top, definitely. On the bottom, I think his legs, just to make the weight cut off, are going to be a little bit weak. Let's look here at Martin compared.
Now, as you see the thickness in Martin comparison?
Yeah, Martin just has such thick legs, and he's so thick through the lats, through the chest,
Everything.
just kind of everything. Let's click over here to Sean, and it's just the same. He's got the same kind of thickness.
Yeah, it's some short and smaller.
Let's go through these call out photos that I grabbed from this year's Olympia. They're as close as I could get them to, correct sizing, but they were shot on different lenses, so it's going to be a little bit hard to get exact. But I kind of think I'm like 85% the way there. So, what's your thoughts, first, second, third on this pose?
Well, like in this picture, Chris looks phenomenal, and he looks bigger than them.
Yeah,
but I think this picture's not proportionate to what he's actually going to look like.
Yeah, I think he's going to look about this tall, but I think he is not going to quite look this big on his legs.
Yeah, or anywhere else. I think you're going to see the size disparity. Like in this picture, Chris looks like he's the winner. But I think when you put them next to each other, you're going to see that
this actually might be one of the few poses that I would actually maybe give to Chris, just because of his aesthetics, and his structure. So I think you're going to see maybe a little bit more in the later photos, the disparity of the size. But let's see. Then let's go over here to front lat spread. This one you can see Martin's legs really kind of pop. This actually isn't a great pose for Martin. He kind of lacks that, I think, flexibility in his shoulders to get his wrists, his hands high enough.
It's like he's not pulling his lats out.
Yeah, and that's actually the way he does it. It's not, it's in a bad spot. He just doesn't have, I think it's just the flexibility. I'd like to see him get his hands up closer to his lats.
I think he's just not hitting the pose.
The way that Chris is doing it would look so much better if Martin was able to get his lats, his arms up like that. But nonetheless, his legs look really crazy in that.
And you see the thickness through the chest and the arms.
And then,
Sean was flat at this show, even by his standard. So he's way downsized.
Yeah, if we're looking at the Sean from 2022, I think it was the last time he won the Olympia.
Yeah, big difference.
He was a freaking monster, and now, 2 years later, he's just not quite the pop that he was.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He was over dieted, over depleted.
Yeah, I don't know if that comes back to what our last podcast was about Matt not coaching him correctly. I've heard rumors that he kind of did a lot of his own stuff anyways. So if it maybe just, I know he built a gym, maybe just a stress thing.
No, I think it was just
poor coaching,
improper dieting and training for the end of the prep. He just lost too much size. But regardless, he now has a new coach, Stefan. But he doesn't have a whole lot of time. I'm sure he's going to be a little fuller at this show than he was at the Olympia.
He doesn't have time to gain muscle.
But yeah, he's only got 4 weeks, so he can't really do a whole lot then.
So this is probably one of Chris's best poses. But again, Martin just shows, it's really one of Martin's best poses as well.
Yeah.
So he just shows that thickness through the legs, through the arms, through the chest, that I think that Chris is it's going to just become apparent when a really thick aesthetic guy like Martin goes on stage against somebody that is not
now,
as
one thing I want to mention, there's been an argument about Bumstead winning the Open based on superior structure and everything. And if he was going against a Nick Walker, then it would be like apples and oranges. And it'd be like, okay, yeah, Nick Walker's bigger and thicker, but he's got a big wide waist and short legs and all this other stuff. Now you've got Martin here, and Martin's aesthetic. He's got the small waist, everything's proportioned, balanced, and has the mass and the conditioning. So this is going to be a tough one for him to overcome. I think in my opinion, impossible.
Yeah, I mean, Martin, the only way that I think that really Martin could lose this is if he just comes in really wet and then for some reason just isn't able to have a decent look on
Which
stage.
we've not seen him do that in the last 3 shows he's done. So
Yeah.
I highly doubt he's going to come in off.
Okay. So this is where Chris really starts to get hurt. You can see, even if the other photos the weren't quite scaled right, this one you can see that he just doesn't have that development in his traps, the lat thickness. You know, he just kind of misses it. Definitely, you know, even in the back of his shoulders. So
Thickness in the back of his legs, quad sweep.
I might give Chris a couple poses, but I would say that maybe out of the 8 poses, it would be like 2, maybe the front double, maybe the front lat, and then probably the abs and thighs, and then beyond that, it's just gonna be all Martin or Sean from there.
Yeah.
This is one Sean might actually win for me.
Yeah, but I think when you see him standing next to Martin, how much smaller he is.
Sean has won against big guys though. He beat
Sergio and
Sergio and
he beat,
Regan.
Yeah, but they were out of shape. Martin's not going to be out of shape.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was in the best shape of his life. He looked phenomenal, and he beat those guys who were way bigger. But both of them were way out of shape. Now you got Martin fully conditioned and way bigger. So I just don't see him overcoming that. Look at the size difference.
Yeah, there's I think this is kind of almost accurately sized, so there's quite a difference on these ones. Martin is 5'7", maybe a little over 5'7", and I would say he's about 240 on stage. Sean 5'2" and about 180 on stage.
Yeah, so he's giving up 60 pounds.
So this is one pose I think that Chris might pull out ahead on just because of his aesthetics.
I don't know. Martin's pretty damn good with the striations and the quads. The abs are good. Midsection's tight. I still see him just. I like the look of Chris, but I think when he's on side by side, he's going to look thin.
I don't know what's going on here. I had to go to last year's Olympia for this photo of Sean, and he just looked, for some reason, kind of wet through the midsection. I don't know. He didn't look great.
Yeah, he was distended last year.
Yeah. Most muscular. This is one that Chris doesn't have to do because he's a classic guy, but he does it in his routine. I mean, Martin's just gonna, you know, it's kind of a muscle pose.
Yeah.
So
Martin just kills it on this.
Yeah. I think it's fun for bodybuilding because, I mean, look at all the content that's gotten made. Everyone's talking about it. I almost saw every single person posting about it, putting it on their story. But I don't really give Chris a whole lot of potential to win this show, in my opinion.
They actually have polls out right now, and the polls, this shows you how smart people are in bodybuilding. The polls have Chris winning. There's a famous bodybuilder who I have $1,000 bet with, but I agreed not to mention his name till the thing is over and I win.
He thinks I know who it is. He thinks that Chris is going to win.
He thinks Chris is going to win.
Well, if Chris wins, it's corrupt, in my opinion. It's just because it's a corrupt competition, which that would be terrible for the IFBB because then it would just point to like how
he wants bodybuilding to go in a certain direction of aesthetic over mass.
That's what Classic is for. We have that.
Exactly. I was at the Lou Ferrigno show, and they had a pro show there. Brandon Curry actually won it several years ago.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they marched all the competitors from all divisions out on stage at the beginning of the competition. And I remember the Classic guys standing next to the open bodybuilders and just thinking like, wow,
skinny.
Like they look big on stage, but when they were standing next to the open bodybuilder, they look like the Classic guy looked like he could fit in the open bodybuilder's one leg. That's how different the size disparity was.
Well, beyond the size disparity, there's just different classes for a reason. I mean, if you're a narrower guy, you don't put on a whole lot of mass, you're a Classic. You need to get in where you fit in. You're a Classic guy. If you're a stocky guy, you got broad shoulders and you put on mass like freaking no other, like Nick Walker or Martin, then you're probably going to be a bodybuilder, you know?
Well, let's talk about that. The reason they came up with, first of all, was the board shorts. Physique, was to get more people to compete, because a lot of the people were training for years and years, and
They just didn't have the
they didn't have the genetics to put on the size to compete, or they didn't want to put in the work and the time to compete as an open bodybuilder. So first they came up with the regular Physique with the board shorts, and then they came out with a classic. And I remember when classic first came out and Danny Hester won it, there was every single person bodybuilder that was like a light heavyweight bodybuilder that had been competing and not winning for years and years and years. All of a sudden, they were all hyped up to be classic, and because they fit a height and weight category. Well, just because you're a certain height and weight doesn't mean you're going to be doing good in classic, because if you don't have that structure and shape that they're looking for in classic, your height and weight isn't going to make any difference. But they want a certain structure in classic and a certain like flow and everything. But again, there's height and weight restrictions, and again, a lot of people compete in that because genetically, or they didn't want to take the amount of gear, or they just want to wait 10 years to be able to compete on a high level.
I mean, some people can't. I mean, I've trained with guys that, you know,
I said genetically, they can't do it.
Yeah, they just don't have, they have the work ethic, and they eat 14 times the food that I do, and they take the same amount of gear, and they just do not put on the mass that I do, sitting right next to them, lifting the same weights, doing the same thing. And they just, you know, they just have the genetics to be a smaller guy for some reason. I mean, it's
just like genetics. Dogs, you know, I have a bulldog, weighs 130 pounds.
And
he never lifted a weight. He doesn't barely walk. And, you know, he's all muscle. And then, you know, you have chihuahuas that weigh 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Different
people. Same species, but they're just totally different animals.
Yeah. Different people are built different.
So, let's touch on real quick. You mentioned it a minute ago about Sean going over to Stefan, boss of Outlaw, and there's actually been a flood of guys that I've heard. I heard somebody had like 10 guys and girls in the Olympia, this last Olympia, and now he's got Sean. I think I heard Brett was with him because Martin's with him. Who else was leaving? I haven't heard who Nick Walker went with yet.
They just made an announcement of Nick Walker, but I don't think it was.
Was it Dominique?
Somebody, it wasn't.
Dom Super Slice, I think, maybe, because he was coached by him years ago. I don't know if he went back. Who else was there that was with?
So far, I've heard about Sean, and Brett said he was considering. Those are the two that are for sure.
I think I've heard a few others, but it's kind of interesting. I remember maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, Patrick Tour was the it guy, and he was like kind of new on the scene, and then he won with like Ian, and then there was like Fuad and like 10 other pros jumped over to him, and then now I guess that Boss of Outlaw is the P Tour of 2024.
Yeah, and I
mean, I don't know much about him. I haven't looked into his stuff. Obviously, he's done pretty well with his people. But it's just kind of funny how the industry jumps and thinks that somebody has got the secret sauce. If one of their clients wins a show, it seems like a flood of bodybuilders.
I think, you know, Martin did so well in the Olympia and he looked so phenomenal, they just automatically attributed it to his coach.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is Martin probably looked phenomenal with any coach.
Yeah, he's got a great work ethic. So, all right, let's wrap this one up. You got anything to say?
So it's Larry Pog, Luke Harrow from Underground Performance Gym. Don't forget to go on undergroundperformancegym.com. We have sales on HD supplements and all Chemex. If you want to reach Luke or I for contest prep training or consultations, the links will be on our Instagrams in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep bringing this content.
Boom.